I never thought a box of old letters would change everything. But that's exactly what happened last summer. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had spent 3 years making me feel like an outsider in my own family. But those yellow pages revealed a truth that would silence her forever. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Maya, and I married Michael Anderson 4 years ago. We met in graduate school. He was studying architecture while I was getting my PhD in literature. From the moment we started dating, I knew his mother would be a problem. Patricia Anderson was what you'd call old money, the kind of person who thought having ancestors on the Mayflower made you American royalty. The first time I met her, she spent 20 minutes explaining how the Andersons had built this town before asking about my background. When I told her I was born in India but moved to the States as a child, her smile became so tight I thought her face might crack. "How interesting," she said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Still, I loved Michael and he loved me. We had a beautiful wedding that blended both our cultures. Though Patricia complained about every ethnic element we included. "Couldn't you just have a normal wedding?" she asked during the planning. "All this color, it's so overwhelming." But Michael stood firm, and we had the celebration we wanted. The real problem started when we moved into the old Anderson family home last year. The sprawling Victorian had been in Michael's family for generations, and when his grandmother passed away, she left it to him. Patricia had expected to inherit it herself and wasn't happy about us living there. But the will was clear. The house belonged to Michael, and by extension to me. "Just remember," Patricia said when we moved in, "this is an Anderson family home. It has traditions that need to be respected." The way she looked at me made it clear she didn't consider me part of that family, despite my sharing her son's last name. I tried to make it work. Every Sunday we hosted family dinners, a tradition Michael's grandmother had started decades ago. I would cook alongside Michael, blending traditional American dishes with some of my family's recipes. The first time I served butter chicken alongside the usual roast, Patricia pushed her plate away. "What is that smell?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. "It's so pungent. This is why I said we should stick to proper family recipes in this house." Michael defended me as he always did. "Mom, Maya's cooking is incredible. You haven't even tried it." "I don't need to try it," she sniffed. "Your grandmother would be rolling in her grave if she knew what was happening to her kitchen." That was 3 months ago. Since then, every family dinner has become a battlefield. Patricia makes snide comments about exotic spices ruining the house's atmosphere. She dramatically opens windows in the middle of dinner, claiming she needs fresh air. Once, she even brought her own dinner in a Tupperware container, announcing that her delicate constitution couldn't handle foreign food. Last week was the breaking point. I had spent hours preparing a special menu for Michael's birthday, all his favorites, including my mom's famous biryani, which he'd fallen in love with. Patricia walked in, took one look at the table, and turned to the entire family. "Your culture doesn't belong at our table," she declared loudly. "This is an Anderson home, and we eat Anderson food. I don't know why you insist on forcing your different ways on us." The room fell silent. Michael's cousins looked uncomfortable, his aunt studied her water glass intently, and his sister Amanda wouldn't meet my eyes. But what hurt most was that Michael, my fierce defender, seemed suddenly fascinated by his shoes. I fled to the kitchen, fighting back tears. Through the door, I could hear Patricia's voice. "Really, Michael? I don't know why you let her take over like this. Your grandmother would be so disappointed." That night, after everyone left and Michael was asleep, I went up to the attic. Sometimes, when the house felt too big, too Anderson, I'd go there to think. It was the one place Patricia never visited. She claimed the dust aggravated her allergies. I was sitting on an old trunk when I noticed something odd about the floorboard beside it. One board was slightly raised, different from the others. When I pressed it, it moved. Beneath it was a small space containing a box of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. The first letter I pulled out was dated 1955, written on delicate paper that had yellowed with age. The handwriting was elegant, but the words changed everything. As I read through letter after letter, my hands started shaking. "My dearest Priya," the first one began. "My heart aches every day we're apart. Mother says a proper Boston family would never accept a marriage to an Indian man. But I don't care. I love you, and I'll find a way for us to be together." The letters were signed Elizabeth Anderson, Patricia's mother. I stayed in the attic until dawn, reading through decades of secret correspondence between Michael's grandmother and her Indian love. They never married. Elizabeth was forced into a proper marriage instead, but they wrote to each other for 40 years. The last letter was dated just months before her death. Tomorrow is Sunday dinner. Patricia will be here, ready to remind everyone that I don't belong. But this time, I have grandmother Elizabeth's letters. And I think it's time the Anderson family learned about their real history. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. I hadn't shown Michael the letters yet. Something told me this needed to be revealed to everyone at once. As I prepared for family dinner, my hands trembled slightly while chopping vegetables. This week, I decided to make Elizabeth Anderson's favorite dishes, described lovingly in her letters to Priya. "Something smells amazing," Michael said, walking into the kitchen. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, and I leaned into his embrace. "But it's different from your usual cooking. What are you making?" "An old family recipe," I answered truthfully, thinking of Elizabeth's detailed descriptions of the meals Priya had taught her to cook in secret. In one letter, she'd written about mastering butter chicken, practicing in her kitchen late at night when everyone else was asleep. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 p.m. Patricia was nothing if not punctual. She walked in wearing her usual Sunday best, pearls gleaming at her throat, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Behind her came Amanda and her husband, followed by Michael's cousins and aunt. "What is that smell?" Patricia's nose wrinkled the moment she entered. "Maya, I thought we discussed this last week. This is an Anderson home, and we have a long history of enjoying Indian cuisine," I interrupted smoothly. The entire family turned to stare at me. I had never interrupted Patricia before, always choosing to stay quiet in the face of her jabs. Her face reddened. "I beg your pardon." "Please everyone sit down," I said, gesturing to the dining room. "Dinner is ready, and I have something to share." The family settled around the table, confusion evident on their faces. I brought out the dishes I'd spent all day preparing. Butter chicken made exactly as Elizabeth had described in her letters, saffron rice, and traditional naan bread. Finally, I placed the box of letters in the center of the table. "What is that?" Patricia demanded, eyeing the box suspiciously. "These are your mother's letters," I said quietly. "I found them in the attic yesterday." Patricia's face went pale. "My mother's? No, you must be mistaken. All of Mother's correspondence was properly archived. Not these letters." I picked up the first one, the paper crisp under my fingers. These were hidden under a floorboard. They're letters to someone named Priya. The change in Patricia's expression was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from her face entirely, and her hand clutched her pearl necklace. "Those are private," she whispered. "Like your mother's love for Priya was private?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Like the recipes they shared, the dreams they had, the life they wished they could have built together." Michael looked between his mother and me, confusion clear on his face. "Mom? What's Maya talking about?" Patricia's hands shook as she reached for her water glass. That was a different time. Mother was young, confused. It wasn't proper. "No," I said, pulling out another letter. "She wasn't confused. She was in love. For 40 years she wrote to Priya. Even after she married your father, even after having you, she never stopped loving her." The family sat in stunned silence as I read portions of Elizabeth's letters. Her beautiful words described a love that transcended cultural boundaries, a connection that survived decades of separation. She wrote about learning to cook Indian dishes in secret, about dreams of a life she could never have, about her hopes that future generations would be braver than she was. In her last letter, I said, holding up the final envelope, "Your mother wrote something I think you need to hear, Patricia." I cleared my throat and read. "My dearest Priya, my greatest regret is not fighting harder for our love. Society told us it was wrong, that our different cultures couldn't mix. But love knows no such boundaries. I pray that my grandchildren will live in a world where they can love freely, where no one tells them their hearts must stay within the lines of tradition and propriety." Tears were streaming down Patricia's face now. "Stop," she whispered. "Please." "Your mother loved Indian culture," I continued softly. "She learned our recipes, our traditions, our language, all in secret because she wasn't allowed to love openly. And now you're doing the same thing she faced. You're trying to keep cultures separate, to maintain some illusion of proper tradition." Amanda, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Mom, Is this true? Did grandmother really? Patricia's shoulders slumped. I found one of their letters when I was 16, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Mother made me promise never to tell anyone. She said it would ruin our family's reputation. I spent my whole life trying to be what she couldn't be, a proper Anderson. But being a proper Anderson doesn't mean rejecting other cultures, I said, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Your mother proved that love and tradition can cross any boundary. These recipes I made today, they're from her letters. This is your family's history too. The silence that followed felt heavy with decades of hidden history. Patricia sat there, her hands trembling as she reached for one of the letters. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked vulnerable, almost fragile. I remember her sometimes, Patricia said softly, running her fingers over her mother's handwriting. Late at night, in the kitchen, I'd wake up and smell these amazing aromas. She'd be cooking, but she'd quickly hide everything when anyone came in. I always wondered. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. The butter chicken you made today, it smells exactly like those nights. Michael reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. Mom, he said, all this time you've been fighting against Maya's influence in our family. You were really fighting against a part of your own history. Patricia nodded slowly, picking up another letter. Mother was different in her last years. Softer. She's the one who insisted Michael should have this house, you know. She looked at me directly. I think she saw something in your relationship that reminded her of what she never had. Amanda wiped tears from her eyes as she read one of the letters. Listen to this, she said. My dearest Priya, today I watched young couples walking freely together in the park, holding hands, sharing their love with the world. Times are changing, slowly but surely. Perhaps one day, our grandchildren will live in a world where love needs no hiding, where tradition bends instead of breaks, where families can be as colorful and diverse as the gardens I tend. She wrote that in 1989, I said gently. She lived to see the world changing, Patricia. And now her grandson is married to an Indian woman, the very thing she wished she could have had with Priya. Patricia set down the letter she was holding and stood up abruptly. For a moment, I feared she was going to leave. Instead, she walked around the table to where I sat and did something she had never done before. She hugged me. I'm so sorry, she whispered against my hair. I've been so foolish, so stuck in what I thought tradition meant. Mother would be so disappointed in how I've treated you. No, I said, hugging her back. She'd understand. She knew how hard it is to break free from what we think we're supposed to be. When we separated, Patricia wiped her eyes and looked at the food on the table. Would you teach me how to make these dishes, the ones Mother learned from Priya? Of course, I smiled. And maybe you could teach me some of the Anderson family recipes too. We can blend them, just like Elizabeth and Priya wanted to. The rest of that dinner was different from any we had before. Patricia asked questions about each dish, listening intently as I explained the spices and techniques. She even took seconds of the butter chicken, admitting it reminded her of happy childhood memories she'd almost forgotten. 3 months have passed since that Sunday. The letters changed everything. Now Patricia comes over early before family dinners to cook with me. We're creating a family cookbook that includes both Anderson classics and Indian dishes, with Elizabeth and Priya's story woven throughout. Last week, she brought me a sari that had been hidden away in her attic, a gift from Priya to Elizabeth that her mother had never dared to wear. I think it belongs with you now, she'd said, presenting the carefully preserved silk. You're the daughter she would have wanted. Yesterday, as we prepared Sunday dinner together, Patricia turned to me suddenly. You know, she said, measuring out garam masala with careful precision. Mother always said the heart of a family is in its kitchen. I never really understood what she meant until now. I watched her confidently stir the curry we were making, no longer flinching at the strong aromas of Indian spices. Elizabeth would be proud, I said. Of both of us. Yes. Patricia smiled, tasting the sauce. I think she would be. Now should we add more cream to this? I remember Mother's version being a little richer. As I helped her adjust the seasonings, I glanced at the framed letter we'd hung in the kitchen. Elizabeth's last words to Priya, reminding us that love and tradition can evolve, that families grow stronger when they embrace change instead of fearing it. In the end, it wasn't just about the food or the letters. It was about healing old wounds, about understanding that tradition isn't a rigid boundary, but a living, breathing thing that grows richer when we allow it to embrace new stories, new flavors, new love.